have a couple special thank yous first to start off the evening. This event was organized by a group of millennial residents here in Burlington who wanted to ensure that people aged 18 to 40 years old are represented and understood by their local government. There's no organization financially backing the event, and actually each candidate has equally contributed 25% of the cost for the venue this evening, so thank you. Also, thank you to the candidates for making this a reality this evening. Thank you to SB Prime for donating appetizers. I love my food. Thank you, Julia Riccatoni, for all of your hard work in helping to organize this, in addition to Carl Wolf, who is at Oktoberfest, Prost, and also to Mark McGuire. So big special thank you to those millennials. So as per usual on all forums, we do have a few housekeeping items. Please turn your phones on to silent, but keep them live on social media. All attendees are welcome to engage and share their thoughts through Twitter using the hashtag #BurlennialsVote. Please do not respond to any of the candidates' answers. If you want to do that, maybe you should consider running in 4 years. And instead, provide thoughts through the Twitter hashtag. Again, hashtag #BurlennialsVote. That way we'll be able to review the comments after the event. So the format for this evening: questions were submitted with online registrations, and all 4 candidates will have an opportunity to respond. We don't have time to ask every question, but we try to accommodate all of the topics that were brought up by the attendees. We ask the candidates to be respectful of each other. And a rule for tonight: we will be stopping any candidate from commenting on another candidate's actions or platform in a negative way. You may forfeit your ability to answer a question. I'm telling you, there's a twist. We're millennials, we like to be nice to each other. You may forfeit your ability to answer a question should you do this. Everyone is here to learn, and about each of the candidates' plan for our generation, and bullying will not be tolerated. So to kick off, each of the candidates had actually supplied a 200-word less bio. So we'll just go through and I'll read what they had submitted. So first, here we have Marianne Mead Ward. Thank you for joining us. She is a Ward 2 City Regional Councillor since 2010. She's currently running to be the next Mayor of Burlington due to votes by the current Mayor and Council for Overdevelopment, approving applications 2 to 4 times the provisions in the official plan, despite exceeding provincial growth forecasts. 185,000 by 2031, and Burlington was 183,000 in 2016. Marianne's family moved to Burlington in 2000, when the oldest was 2 and twins were born. Prior to that, she was a journalist for 22 years, working 10 years at the National Magazine before starting her own business, providing on-air commentating, writing, consulting, teaching for a range of clients, including the CBC, Chatelaine, CHCH, TVO, Toronto Sun, Vision TV, Ryerson University, and more. She continues to use her journalism skills to help residents be involved in decision-making with a community newsletter, website, and social media, letting the community know about votes before they happen. She believes in government for the people, with the people, and recently worked with members of the Millennial Advisory Committee to secure transit service on Christmas and New Year's Day. She's also welcomed co-op high school students to her office and given time to university media students for coursework. Thank you, Marianne. Next, we have Rick Goldring. Rick was sworn into office as City of Burlington's 28th Mayor on December 1st, 2010, after serving 4 years as a City and Regional Councillor for Ward 5, and was re-elected Mayor in 2014. Rick is a lifelong resident of Burlington. He went to Nelson High School and earned a BA in Economics from McMaster University. Between Rick and his wife Cheryl, they have a combined total of 7 daughters and 5 grandchildren. Thank you, Rick. Next, we have Mike Wallace. Mike grew up in Port Elgin and attended the University of Guelph. He attended with a double major in political science and economics. He was also president of the University of Guelph Student Council. Mike and his wife Caroline chose Burlington as their home in 1987, as they understood it was one of the best cities in Ontario. They raised 2 daughters, Ashley and Lindsay, here. Both of them are in their mid-20s. Mike has served 12 years as Ward 5 City Councillor and 9 years as your federal member of parliament. Mike was the chair of Standing Committee of Justice and Human Rights in Ottawa. Mike has worked very hard at making Burlington a better place for everyone. These efforts have been frequently recognized. He has received Burlington Tourism Builder of the Year and is Queen's Jubilee Medal recipient. He is also an honorary member of the Brill Oak Naval Veterans Association and the recipient of the Order of the Rising Silver and Gold Medal from the Government of Japan. Some of Mike's achievements include the cleanup of Randall Reef, the creation of the Performing Arts Center, and saving parkland in southeast Burlington. Thank you, Mike. And last but not least, we have Greg Woodruff. Greg has lived much of his life in Halton. He attended high school at M.M. Robinson in Burlington, and then attended Ryerson University in Toronto, where he earned a Bachelor's of Science and Applied Computer Science in 1998. Following university, he moved back to Burlington region and spent time working for many large companies, including IBM, Eli Lilly, and Unisys. He soon started his own business, Comexton Corporation, which builds management and e-commerce applications for other businesses. Then in 2008, he moved to the Aldershot area in Burlington. While living in Aldershot, Greg witnessed new developments, which on the surface look positive, but which he is convinced seed long-term and difficult to reverse problems into our community. In 2012, Greg got involved with city politics, and in 2014 ran for regional chair and came in second with just over 5,800 votes. Greg has 3 children, which he is raising with his wife in Aldershot. All right, thank you very much. And now that we have a bit of a background on our bio, we're going to begin. So round 1, as a reminder, it is 2 minutes per question. Julia will be our logistics timekeeper right in front. So she'll announce when there's 30 seconds left. And when the time up comes up, so does my hand comes down. And fermez la bouche. Sorry. Anyway. All right. So we'll have 4 questions, 2 minutes each. To be fair, we'll start on this side, and then we'll just keep moving down. If you don't mind, Greg, we're going to pass that microphone to start. So if you could pass that one, it detaches. Fantastic. So this will be our speaking stick. Okay. So, 2 minutes per question. And the first question comes from Allison in Ward 2. Allison would like to know, what are your ideas to make both the rental and real estate market more affordable for millennials, especially downtown, where young people want to live but can't really afford? Marianne.
Well, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for organizing this, and most importantly, thanks to all of you for being here. It's terrific to see the interest, and really appreciate the millennial folks for pulling this together. There are a couple of ways that we can address affordability, and I think when we get it right for any group in our community, whether it's millennials or seniors or families, we get it right for everybody. So on affordable housing, we can first of all work with private providers. So Halton, Habitat for Humanity Halton, they have built 2 builds in Ward 2. It's just one example, a 17 unit townhouse development for pre-qualified folks. And there's an 18 unit development also happening in Ward 2. And that's the largest single build that has ever happened in Canada. They used to build one house at a time. The other way we can do it is through Halton Region Community Housing Corporation, and I sit on that board. I've been a member of the Halton Health and Social Services Committee, where we have looked at rent supplements. We've looked at assisted housing in the Paradigm building, which is the large structure going up beside the GO station. There are 15 units of assisted housing going in there. So all told, in the last 8 years, I've worked with others. None of us do any of this by ourselves, so there's lots of people that have contributed to this effort. But we've added 46 units of affordable and or assisted housing just in Ward 2. We also need to provide incentives for rental development. The rental units that were built in the 70s were done so with government incentives that went away. That's why we don't have any of that. We also need to hang on to existing rental stock. When you tear down a building and put up a new one, you lose affordability instantly. And I know some of you who live in those, a lot of our apartments that were built in the 70s downtown, that is much more affordable than some of the new units coming. So we need.
Thank you, Marianne. Next, we're on to Rick.
Well, thank you very much, Krista. And first of all, I want to say thank you very much to the organizers, because you're all, we're part of the Mayor's Millennial Advisory Committee that I started several years ago. I guess it was in 2014, I had a special Inspire Burlington event for millennials, and that spawned the Mayor's Millennial Advisory Committee. So I'm thrilled that we're here tonight and with a venue and a forum that's been created by the millennials. I think, first of all, we really need to define what it is we want to accomplish with regard to affordable housing. And we hear it all the time, how do we define affordability? And we need to do that. We need to define specific objectives. And one of the things on our strategic plan, after we completed our official plan, which we're going to be working on very soon, is a housing policy. And in that housing policy, we have some clear definitions of what we mean by affordable housing and what we want to achieve. I firmly believe that rental housing is critical to address the issue of affordable housing for younger people. We only have a 1% vacancy rate in our city. There's very little rental available. And I believe working with the development community and coming up with different programs that can foster and encourage new development around the GO stations and our mobility hubs gives us a great opportunity to create more affordable housing for younger people. I also believe we need to focus more on secondary suites. We have that available as a potential form of housing, and we need to facilitate that more and make the process easier for people to convert part of their home to a secondary suite and then rent it out. Working with Habitat for Humanity, we have a couple of projects that have gone on in Ward 2, one up on Plains Road and one on Queensway. And Habitat has adapted to a new model that allows more than one home development at a time. And we need to figure out more opportunities to work with Habitat. And we look forward to more discussion this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, Mike.
Thank you very much. And I also want to thank the organizers of this event. I wasn't sure what the time frame definition of a millennial is, and now I know it's 40 is the top. I just missed it. But I tried to dress as cool as I could for this event, being a grandpa. But anyways, I want to thank the organizers for this and everyone for coming tonight. Now, you need to know that the light is so bright, I actually can't see your faces. So if you're making faces at me, you can do whatever you want because it won't matter because I can't see it. Affordability is an issue, particularly for young people, and I don't think it's just for downtown Burlington or Ward 2 area. I think it's for the whole city. Look, at my own experience is that my two daughters happen to be in their mid-20s, 25 and 27. Neither one even live in the country, let alone in Burlington. They both live in the United States. But affordability with their cohorts or their group has been an issue in terms of being able for their to move. They went away to school, whether it was college, university, and want to come back to live in Burlington, and it's very, very difficult to find a spot. So two things that I have put forward in my platform, which I released earlier this summer, was the one area that I think we need to do. I always like to use as an example of what Liberty Village does for young people in the west end of Toronto. I think we need to recreate something similar to the Liberty Village concept that is there, where there is a tremendous amount of rental opportunities. There is more affordable ability to get into the marketplace in terms of owning, and it's a community on its own in a sense, with its own grocery store, its own nightlife. It has a business or commercial aspect to it, and adds a real viability and livelihood or liveliness to that area. And I would like to see that happen in Burlington. I would like to see us be proactive, and I also agree with the mayor that the opportunity to have duplex your home, to be able to have a starter apartment opportunities for younger people needs to be further explored.
Thank you, Mike. On to Greg.
Hello. So thanks for everybody coming out and hearing what the mayors have to say and getting involved in the whole process. So my dad bought a house in Pine Meadow for $125,000. I bought a house in Aldershot 15 years ago for $330,000. And now that's off the table completely. So it is not a misjudgment that houses have gotten a lot more expensive. And that is creating a system where if you would like a single family detached house, you're displaced way out. You're living now in Caledonia or Brantford to get back to that inflation adjusted pricing. And the same thing is happening with condos all over. Now, my fellow candidates listed a bunch of things which all should be done and all will help to some almost completely minor level. Because what's driving the affordability problem in my mind is the feds have top line population growth at 300,000. And they don't do a good job of deflecting that population into places where they desperately need population. So 150,000 people a year are trying to descend into the GTA. And that's where the demand comes from. The supply on the province with the Greenbelt and et cetera, they have constrained the supply of land in this region. And when the two forces meet, like any economics professor can tell you, the price just goes up and up and up. And none of the things in the purview of the municipal government are going to make a difference, because the budget is not large enough, and Burlington is not large enough to produce enough units, even at full out, to catch up to the demand. So what we need to do is make it clear this is a provincial problem, and they're the people that need to come up with the money and the plan to put a dent in the affordability problem.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so on to question 2. This one comes from Evelyn in Ward 1. Rick, you'll be first to start. Evelyn would like to know, how will you ensure that Burlington's transit plan meets the demands of our growing density targets?
Well, great, Evelyn. Thank you very much for the question. And obviously, transit is going to be critically important as Burlington grows moving forward. You know, we've identified locations within our strategic plan and our official plan around the GO stations and along the major corridors for more housing and more jobs, et cetera. And we need to invest more in Burlington Transit. We've underinvested over the years. Now's the time to pick up the investments and improve the frequency to 15-minute all-day service on the key arterial roads. And that will fall in line nicely with the GO trains, which will expand to 15-minute all-day service within 7 years. And the GO trains need to be connected to the Burlington Transit system. And also with the GO trains with electrification, some of the trips will be 10 to 15 or 20% quicker. So that's what we're going to have to do, is invest more on the major arterial routes. We're also going to have to invest more and figure out a way of how we create safe passage for people that live many hundreds of meters away from a major arterial road. So I propose a transit cab service to connect people either using rideshare or taxi to the major roads to connect to the major transit service. And that's the first step that we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question on transit. I've heard a lot about the issues with transit at the door, then I've going door to door over this campaign. Transit is a tricky one. I think to me, we can't ignore the car in Burlington. Obviously, it's a fundamental piece of how we get from A to B. And what I would like to see, though, is that we be able to transition from people from using their cars over to using transit more frequently. Look, I was on council. When I left council, there was about 1 million on and off rides. And you know, we're 15 years later, and we basically haven't grown the system in terms of the number of people. We need to be able to get people on the system to make it pay. The subsidy that the taxpayer has for transit now is about $10 million, if you look at the last budget. I believe that we need the transit, I think, and we need to improve its frequency. And I'm also not opposed to looking at a more GTAY West approach to transit, a much more integrated approach. And I'll give you an example of when somebody wants to use the handy van to go to the hospital in Oakville, they have to change buses on handy van even to make that happen. I think we have to look overall at the process that we deal with in terms of how we get people from A to B. Do we use rideshare, dollar ride? Is there other opportunities and new technologies that does it have to be a 40-foot bus? I don't think so. I think there are other options. We do have a new transit director who I have dealt with when she was seeing me with CUDA in Ottawa about transit issues across the country. I think she's an excellent individual that can make a difference in our transit system here, and I'm willing to work with her as the mayor and with council to make sure that we get a viable transit system for Burlington.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, unfortunately, it's the Grinch that stole Christmas Part 2 over here. So the entire property rolls are about $150 million. I'll just round the numbers out. And you heard from Mike, it's closer to 11, but we'll take 10 is what we're currently subsidizing the bus system with. And then with the fare box and whatever, it's currently delivering the total money in, it's not quite 20 million, but it's like 15ish, is tremendous for the number of rides that it's actually providing. It's providing rides at like $7.50 a ride, 5 of which is, subsidized by the taxpayer. And unfortunately, the news is this: if we all stick Burlington's budget close to inflation, if we say the property taxes are going to be close to inflation, there is not going to be a huge amount of money to put into transit, and the thing is not going to get revolutionized as is. So you either keep it as it is, you can probably squeeze a little money out of things here and there and make a slight change, but it's not going to revolutionize. So your choices are to leave it as is, or do you say we're going to cut it up into some kind of rideshare subsidy, which people are now hinting around at. And they have done that in the States. In several places, they've taken a large amount of their transit money and they said, we're just going to take $5 off Uber if it's within the city. And a couple places in the States seem to have had a lot of luck with that. And so I would say that's really the only transformative model that you can go to, because the sources of money, like the Ford government is not going to start writing Burlington $20-30 million checks to like pump up transit. And if we keep property taxes the same, that's the two sources of, there's no source of money to double and triple the system. So you either change it to rideshare or you're going to be stuck with what we got now.
Thank you, Greg.
Well, thank you for the question. The bus that is in Ward 1 is actually one of the most well-used buses along New Street. I used to take it when I would go into CH television, and it was standing room only. So on those routes where we have very high ridership, so Fairview, New Street, we need a north-south grid as well, 15-minute or less service to satisfy the demand that's already there, but also get people around efficiently. I don't think it makes sense to have buses meandering through neighborhoods to pick folks up. That not only slows down your commute, but it's not very efficient. And when I used to live in Tyendega, there were a total of about 7 of us that used to ride the bus per day. There was no sense running a fixed route bus up there for half an hour, every half hour, every hour service for the 7 of us. So I actually could get a Burlington taxi to come get me in Tyendega, 2 kilometers from Brant Street, and plug me into the system for the price of my bus ticket and a transfer. That's something that we had as a great idea, and Innisfil and other communities are doing this. Oakville is doing this with Dial-A-Ride, and I think that's one of the things that we can go back to not only satisfy demand on the high ridership routes, but also to service our folks in low rider areas. We also need to look at fares. So I'm very interested in free transit for seniors during off-peak hours, for students to get to school, for Monday free transit. One of the ways that we pay for this is we redistribute the gas tax we already get. It's 75-25 right now. I think it could be 70-30, and I'm committed to that. And we also need to look at a regionalized service. There's no reason it should take me 2 transfers, 2 buses, a GO train, $15, and an hour and a half to get to my job at Halton Region Council, and that's what it takes. There is nobody that can pay that time penalty, let alone that cost.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay, so Mike, you'll start with the next question. Chris from Ward 1 asks, Paris, London, and Quebec City have 3 to 6-story buildings throughout the city, which makes local businesses, transit, and cycling thrive. How will we ensure density and mixed-use communities are spread across all of Burlington, not just concentrated in the downtown core?
Very good question. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the issue of where the vision is for Burlington in terms of where we accommodate growth. Look, I want to be clear. I'm okay with the province telling us, in not just our community, but other communities, what kind of density in terms of our population levels that we need to achieve, whether it's in the next planning stage or the one out to 2041. But where I differ from where the provincial Places to Grow document is, their planning document, the Metrolinx document, is that we should be deciding as a community where that growth is accommodated. And in the current plan, Places to Grow and the Metrolinx, so Places to Grow has downtown as an urban growth center, and and you need to know that the provincial the city's documents have to be congruent with the provincial documents. That's the law. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the way it is. But what we need to do is make those changes at the province make changes to those documents that reflect on Burlington, so that we can use our vision. I think we can accommodate the population growth that they're expecting from Burlington, but it doesn't have to be downtown, for example. I think it can be along the GO train stations where we have the mobility hubs, which I absolutely agree with, that those are mobility hubs, that we can do some growth there. I believe that my vision of what we can do with another area of town for Liberty Village is another area that we can have intensification. And we can accommodate it, but we need a mayor who is able to talk to the people at Queen's Park to make that change. I think I have that experience and those connections at Queen's Park to actually make that happen for Burlington, so that we can control where we develop and where we grow as a community.
Thank you, Mike.
So I'm glad somebody mentioned the height limit, because if you go on my website right now, one of the things that I think I proposed and I think we need is we need a 6-floor residential limit everywhere in Burlington. That includes mobility hubs. That's what a lot of European cities have done. Boulder, Colorado just upped their height ban another year and a half, and it's as high as the highest tree, which is kind of poetic. But what that does is everybody has to realize is the second you sit there and you say, this is it, this is as high as these buildings are going to go, you can run the numbers and you can say, well, here's the number of people that will live in Burlington. You can't just keep imagining the city grows and grows and grows if you don't imagine the buildings just get taller and taller and taller. I think everybody can understand that, right? And the current process that the province has put on us is the idea, and this is one of the reasons why I'm running, because I think this idea is basically nuts, that every city will grow unlimitedly until the end of time by some percentage. Everywhere, forever. And at no point will the city ever come up and go, you know what? We now have the livability that we want, and we're happy with what we have here, and we don't need to change again into something else. And the cities in Europe that were referenced, one of the features is they don't grow. They don't expand and keep accommodating more population unlimitedly. They get to a point where downtown Paris is downtown Paris, and it doesn't, its population doesn't grow significantly year to year, right? And so that requires a mindset on what the province is forcing us to do, and that's a whole topic in and of itself, of different ways and systems you can get them to change with their mind. But the current idea is grow forever, and I like much more the idea of the buildings only go so high, and this is the number of people that can accommodate in Burlington, and we'll go from there and plan our transit and other systems around that number.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much. Well, this question is really why I'm running at all to be your next mayor. I'm very concerned about making sure we get the right amount of height and density in the right place. I'm not against growth. The residents that I talk to are not against growth and change. And we have been meeting all of our provincial growth targets already. I think we can continue to meet them with appropriate form in different places. So biggest reason I'm running is overdevelopment throughout the city, but this is a site plan map of downtown Burlington that it's in the new official plan that was approved 6/1 by the current council. And that will bring up to 30 more high-rises in downtown Burlington. That's 12 stories, 17 stories, 22 stories. I think that's excessive. It's excessive for the infrastructure we have there. It will compromise the character of the downtown. Our current plan is mid-rise, the Paris model, the London model. 4 to 6 stories, 4 to 8 stories, but you can only get to that 8 if the site can take it, if you have justified it through community benefits and technical studies. It's not easy to make the jump. So going from 4 to 12 right off the jump is excessive, and we didn't get anything as a benefit in the community for that. Only when you go from 12 to 17 do you get an extra benefit. So I'm running to modify that plan for the downtown to bring it back to a mid-rise form, because I think that's where that's appropriate downtown. High rises fit better at the GO station. So we've got 5 towers going up by the Burlington GO station, almost 1,000 new units, which I think is the way it should be there. We also need to remove the urban growth center and mobility hub designations from the downtown that has caused the OMB, for example, to rule against us and award a 26-story building because it's a mobility hub downtown. That will continue to happen until we remove those designations, and I lost that motion at Council 6-1 as well.
Thank you, Marianne.
Interesting question. I mean, comparing Paris to other North American cities like Burlington and suburban cities. So Paris has a density of 21,000 people per square kilometer. And why is that? Because they have 6 stories everywhere. Burlington is limited where we can develop. And we've clearly stated in our plan, and our strategic plan, which we approved unanimously at Council in 2016, and that's also in the official plan, we stated very clearly where growth should go and where it shouldn't grow. And where it should go is in the downtown urban growth center, and where it should go is around the GO stations, around the mobility hubs, where we have the opportunity to create compact, mixed-use, walkable, transit-supportive, complete neighborhoods. So that's critical that we stick to the plan. I do believe, though, that with a new government, we have an opportunity to address places to grow, because I do believe it is forcing us to grow in ways that aren't keeping with our community values. So we need to take a time out. And this new provincial government is willing to have that discussion. And this is a new opportunity for Burlington to have that discussion, that we can take a pause and reflect on where we are and see what amendments we can make going forward. The other piece of this is we need to get control of the pace of development. If 20 development applications come in all at once, we have to deal with them over a 6 or 7 month period. We don't have the flexibility to not deal with them. I also want to point out the comment about 30 towers in downtown Burlington. I brought forward an amendment to the official plan that dropped the height on many of those buildings to 12 stories. And you can only get up to 17 stories under certain conditions. And we cannot assume that the official plan is the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw will look at a lot of things, including whether there's environmental issues, and there's pipelines that go underneath a lot of areas in the downtown that restrict development. There's transportation challenges, there's assembly challenges.
Thank you,
To
Rick.
expect we're going to get 30 buildings is unrealistic.
Thank you. Okay, and to conclude our first round, we have our fourth and final question of the 2-minute response. And this question is coming from Anonymous in Ward 1. The question is, how can we facilitate travel between our neighboring cities via transit and relieve the congestion on the highway, particularly at the QEW 403 interchange west of Brant Street?
Well, because what happens is you've set up this whole area to run on automobile point-to-point transit, right? Or point-to-point travel. And you set up all the parking standards and a whole rigmarole of standards to get that to be workable and flexible. And then you said, hey, Burlington's got to hold more people than the people in the year 2000 ever thought. So what you're trying to do is take something that exists and then rejig it into a new model, right? And the answer of what's going to happen is there's going to be much more traffic congestion. And although people keep saying, oh, we'll deflect them to transit, we'll deflect them to transit, we'll deflect them to transit, between the density that you have now, which is 20 effectively, and the per hectare, and the density of 200, which is, you know, these places that we're talking about, is a gulf of 40 years of development, right? And so where is the magic transit money coming to go from here to there? And the answer is it doesn't exist. Right? And so you're stuck in this mode of being unable to get transit going because you don't have the funding, because you don't have the ridership. And yet everyone is still bringing their cars because it's the only practical way to get around. And the you know, it's the same thing. Those two forces, when combine into terrible congestion, increasing congestion, which we're all just losing time and energy with, you know, every day. And I saw, you know, there was a reaction when the 30 buildings were mentioned. The 30 buildings is the tip of the iceberg. Okay, if you let that new official plan build out, it's 100,000 people in hundreds of high rises everywhere, all around the mobility hubs, all down Plains Road, all down Fairview, all, like, it's everywhere. It's not that there's just 3 little pockets and I don't have to worry about this plan. It's on every strip mall that we use is tagged for redevelopment, every single one of them, with condos and removal surface parking. So the plan is way more extensive than people understand. It's trying to put Burlington in a completely new dynamic. And the problem trying to get to that new dynamic, even if you want it, is time and money.
Thank you. Well, hello, Anonymous in Ward 1. It's a great question, and there's a bunch of different ways that we can talk about it. First, when we're planning our community and we want to address traffic and transportation, we have to not overdevelop. That's where it starts. Overdevelopment is causing so many of the negative issues that we face in our community, from loss of trees and green space, loss of retail space, rising house prices, lack of affordability because it's creating land speculation, approvals that are 2, 3, 4 times the official plan is causing that jack in prices. So all of these things, including transportation, stem from the one decision that is being made over and over again by council to overdevelop. So we need to get that right. And that leads to what I call vertical sprawl. If you have high rises everywhere and you haven't thought about the infrastructure, the road infrastructure surrounding them, or the transit infrastructure that exists, you're going to have congestion. We can address congestion with a number of ways. First of all, the 403 QE intersection, which was mentioned earlier, that is already being reviewed by the province for some changes to that, which will help relieve some congestion there. But we also need to look at what happens when there's an accident on the highway. If you've ever seen those yellow signs with the black EDR, anyone know what those mean? That's what I thought. I can barely see you, but it's emergency detour route, but that's not enforced. So accident just shuts down our community. We need to enforce that. We need synchronized traffic lights. We need regional transit service so there's better connections, so you don't have to get off a bus at Burl Oak, whether it's a handy van or whether it's a conventional transit, to transfer to cross into other communities. I'm interested in looking at roundabouts to speed traffic where they work and where we can fit them, and we've already got some of those in regional areas.
Thank you, Marian.
So thank you very much for the question. A good question with regard to how we're going to deal with transit in the western end of the GTA. And whether it's a Halton Region Transit Authority or a Western GTA Transit Authority, I do firmly believe we need to head in that direction, because transit just doesn't take you to border. It needs to be much more all-encompassing. And when businesses are planning where they're going to be, they don't consider municipal borders as much as they do the market. So we have to be much more thoughtful in how we deliver transit, and having transit done through a regional basis makes a lot more sense. With regard to the Freeman interchange, there are plans that the ministry has, and I actually met with the Ministry of Transportation in Ottawa at a conference in August, and they have plans. And we need to push it up the queue. We need to work with our MPP, the Minister of Transportation. I do want to point out that in the last 4 years, I've had the opportunity to serve on the board of directors of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And part of that role included meeting with provincial cabinet each and every month. And not just meeting with provincial cabinet, but meeting with staff of the different ministries. And I had the opportunity to develop all sorts of relationships that I can get things done at Queen's Park as well by expanding on those relationships and cultivating those relationships and connecting with people. And that's all I got for this one.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, thank you for the question, and it has come to me. Let me start with the second part of the question first. There is, through my door knocking, and I believe through my Facebook Live, which I do every Monday night, there's been a number of questions about how we can improve the intersection there where the QEW and the 403 split off. And I think one of the best suggestions that we had is, could we have, I know the province is looking at making changes there, but in terms of just signage alone, to letting people know that they need to get, if they're going to be going towards QEW Niagara, they need to get over to the left-hand lanes a lot sooner than at the last minute, what happens, which often causes much of the delay and the bottleneck that happens there. And there were some good suggestions that came forward on this. Look, I have to be honest with you. I put out early on that I think one of the things that we need to do is have a GTA West transit integrated system, and that includes at the bureaucratic level. I'm glad my colleagues here on the stage have come to the conclusion that I was right, and that that's something we should be doing. And I think, well, I don't know why we haven't done it before. It isn't like transit hasn't been an issue. The other thing I'd like to see us try, I'm not sure if it will work or not, but there are other communities that have roads that are 4 lanes and normal traffic times, but when it's a busier time, going east or west in our case, could we make those roads 3 lanes one way the back? Let's say Harvester, for example, maybe Main Way, at least in times of an emergency, to try to move traffic through town in a more efficient and effective manner. So I think there's some new ideas that we need to put on the table, and I appreciate that the current mayor had a relationship with the Liberal government, but they're not there anymore. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so to switch things up just a little bit, we're going to change the pace. So it's going to be an activity where we involve the audience. And because this is a millennial targeted event, we're going to ask all the millennials to please stand. That includes me. Don't be shy.
I can stand and take a stretch.
Or take a stretch break if you need to. Okay, so for those of you standing, these questions apply to you. Just to give us some insight. Please sit down if you currently do not work. At all. Yeah. All right. Do 3 jobs count? Okay, anyways. Please sit down if you live with your parents. And for those of you that work outside of Burlington, please sit down. All right. So this here is an actual depiction of the millennials living in Burlington. Please heed these results and take notice, because a lot of us aren't working in the city, and there's probably a reason for that. All right. You may have a seat. Thank you. And to continue that, our leadership should be aspiring to ensure that there are more of us standing to reflect opportunities and quality of life available in Burlington. So thank you again for participating in that activity. And for those of you who are watching live or at home, there are approximately 5 people left standing. Okay. All right, so we're on to round 2. Round 2 is a section of questions, and each response will be 1 minute. And again, Julia, our trusted timer, we're good to go? Yes? Fantastic. So the first question, would you mind starting? Are you okay with starting? I'm okay with starting. All right. Yeah, we could. You know what? I'm pretty laissez faire and laid back. If you're okay, I'm okay.
However you want to do it.
All right. So question number 5. This comes from Sandra in Ward 2. How do you feel about growth north of the 407?
Okay, so how do I feel about it? I would prefer plans that take the global pressure off. But I can't believe that at some point, the problems, if not resolved in the south, just don't lead to what's going to come down the pipe is someone is just going to say, all these people are idiots, what we need is roads, and what we need is more place to build houses. And that person will get elected in 8 years, 12 years, 16 years. So I don't want to go chopping up the green belt, right? I want a more reasonable development profile expected of Burlington.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Sandra, in Ward 2 for that question. I do not believe we should be developing at all past the 407. We have to protect our green belt. And it's more than just a rural area that urban folks like myself who lives downtown go to visit, or our conservation areas. This is a thriving agricultural economy that we have. The folks up there feed us. There are farmers, and they are burdened right now by red tape, by regulation. It takes longer than it should to get the approvals that they need to do the work that they know how to do. So we need to protect that area from development, and we need to do what we can to make it the thriving agricultural economy that it already is.
Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you. You know, we've all talked to many people in the city of Burlington. I've talked to thousands of people, tens of thousands probably over the last 12 years since I was elected to council. And the vast majority of people I talk to are very proud of the fact that we're protecting 50% of Burlington's 185 square kilometers that's in the green belt, which is north of Dundas and then the 407 corridor. We should all be very proud of that. And we should all be, proud of the fact that there's so many unique features of that particular area, from the Niagara Escarpment to the unique hamlets and villages of Lowville and Kilbride, Mount Nemo, and so on. We do need to expand the agriculture and encourage that as much as we can, but we also need to make sure that North Burlington is connected in a way that more people will enjoy it. We need to make sure that we facilitate appropriate businesses in the rural area that can bring sort of rural tourism or agricultural tourism to the north part of Burlington and make it more vibrant.
Thanks, Rick.
But still protecting it.
Thank you for the question. The answer is no.
Short and sweet. Moving on. And you started with a question. Sorry, my apologies. You're fine. Hang on. Yeah, let's bring it down to Marianne.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so our next question comes from Scylla from Ward 4. Scylla would like to know, what are you doing to bring jobs for postgraduate students to Burlington?
Thank you, Scylla, in Ward 4. I think we actually sit on a committee together, so it's an unusual name, and thanks for that question. So the first thing we have to do is be straight with each other about job growth numbers, because if we don't know what the issue is, we don't know what the opportunities, the challenges to solve these are. The reality is that Burlington has lost 17 companies between 2016 and 2017, and that should be a wake-up call for all of us. One of the things that I will do as your mayor is make sure that I'm out there selling the virtues of Burlington as the chief spokesperson for Burlington. You know, my husband used to work in Mississauga, and Hazel McCallion knew every business owner. She knew when they were planning to renovate or expand. She would talk to them and make sure they stayed in town, and she would attract business to Mississauga. And so we need that same ability and person in the mayor's office to be that spokesperson and to bring jobs here. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to have congestion.
Thanks,
So thank you very much for the question. I do want to point out that Burlington has the highest jobs per population ratio in the Western GTA. We have more jobs per population than Oakville, Milton, Halton Hills, Hamilton, Waterloo region. We do quite well. We have a strong retail sector, a strong advanced manufacturing sector. And one of the things we do at Burlington Economic Development Corporation is we provide service to companies that are interested in coming to Burlington. And over the last year, about 350 to 400 companies has reached out to our Burlington Economic Development Corporation, and we provide them with opportunities and connected them appropriately and guided them through a concierge service to help them get their permits, et cetera, and so on. We also opened up Tech Place, and Tech Place is about 8,700 square feet that provides a launching pad for entrepreneur-led, technology-based entrepreneurs, new companies to create more jobs and create more prosperity in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and hits home with me with my two daughters moving away and almost all of their friends moving away because the opportunities for employment that is challenging and rewarding was not here. In my view, one of the areas that we need to make new and upstarting and innovative young companies come to Burlington is we need the proper facilities for them. I think we need to look at what Mainway to Harvester, that whole corridor, some of those buildings were built, in the 70s. Do they meet the current needs of what a modern company, high-tech company needs? I think we need incentives for that area to be redeveloped to actually attract the appropriate companies here that would attract young people. And I think I'm the best salesperson on the stage here to make that happen.
So the problem is, I think that around the so-called GO stations, that is where employment should be. And the reason why is because you can get a lot more mileage out of all these systems if the trains are coming full this way and going back to Toronto full. Because that's just dead capacity, right? We're just taking empty trains here in the morning and then sending them full to Toronto. So the problem is if you have a conversation with these people that own these big lands, because there's employment lands that are just fields right now. And the reason why there's not houses on them is because the idea is you have to do employment. They'll say, no one wants to build a bunch of big, boring skyscrapers and huge parking lots and put their company there because the demographics of Burlington doesn't work for you. But they would be interested in, if you could really get some kind of mixed mode Liberty Village thing going, then that would be the type of thing that they might be interested in putting their companies in. They want their employees to be able to walk out for lunch and have dinner and not jump in their car every 5 seconds. And Burlington is kind of missing a large amount of employment space around that type of thing.
Thanks, Greg. All right, so we'll start there. Our next question comes from Antoine from Ward 4. Antoine would like to know, the city development process awards contracts to many Toronto firms. What will you do as mayor to help more Burlington businesses have access to local contracts with the city?
That is a great question, and I've had this question before, and I've met with Burlington businesses that have lost out on bids for jobs by a small amount, and I've introduced them to our procurement people so that they understand the process. Procurement is not simple. You need to be fair to the taxpayer. You need to make sure that you offer it fairly to any company that wants to bid. I do believe, though, there is an opportunity to adjust the scores to include some sort of point system or a number of points for local work that you've done. If you've done local work, you should be able to get some credit for that. But I do want to point out, though, procurement is not simple. You have to be fair to the taxpayer, and you must make sure that you get the best price possible for the taxpayer as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I disagree with the premise of the question. I believe that Burlington companies can be just as competitive as any other company, whether they're in other parts of the GTA or around the world. The companies in Burlington that are successful often are doing exporting into other parts of the world and in other parts of North America. And could you imagine if those cities, towns, governments decide that they were only going to buy locally, how that would affect local Burlington businesses? We need to be able to compete on equal footing. We should be on equal footing with our competitors from Toronto, Mississauga, London, wherever they're from, or from across the border. But I don't believe that there should be a system that says, well, because you're a local company, you get an advantage, because that will hurt them in the long run, in my view, in terms of we are not going to be able to support the economic growth that they would need to be a thriving business.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
So good news. The city is not quite as corrupt as people sometimes think it is. And the reason why it's not is this. There is a pyramid that starts with the city manager, and all of the staff are under the purview and under that whole pyramid of the city manager. And the council picks the city manager. They don't pick any other employees down the chain. And procurement is all handled by professional staff. And if those professional staff are going through a procurement process and the mayor or any other councillor walks into their office and starts giving them tips, there is going to be one heck of a backlash, right? Because that's considered inappropriate against the code, et cetera, et cetera. So you can make policies, but the staff run the procurement process, and they, I presume, run it fairly and honestly, and pick who they think is best to, to service whatever they're buying. So it's difficult. It's set up deliberately. It's difficult for the elected people to manipulate, and it should be like that, because hopefully what that is doing is making sure that the best people at the lowest price are getting these contracts.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Antoine in Ward 4, for the question. So the procurement process includes a whole set of criteria that have to be met when you're bidding on a job. And I've always believed that being a local company should be one of those criteria that is fair. And actually, other communities are already doing this. So Oakville has this in their procurement policies. There are communities across North America who have that as one of their criteria. So you have to still score highly on all of the other technical requirements, on price and those things. But other things being equal, I think it's environmentally beneficial. It's beneficial for our community to have that as one of the criteria that you would be judged on, and you get points for that. It may not carry you over the top, but it should be a consideration, and it is a consideration in municipalities around us.
Thank you. All right, on to the next question. So, Sarah from Ward 5. What efforts are you taking to target the increasing rates of mental health difficulties? and suicide rates among millennials in the community. This is a very important topic to Sarah personally. As a medical student, a colleague in the previous class committed suicide, and a number of resident colleagues also have committed suicide in the past few years. This is from the perspective of the medical profession. In all professions and aspects of life nowadays, there are increasing demands for millennials to perform, and with that comes increasing burnout. What will you do to help remedy these presenting issues?
Well, that is a very difficult question, and I'm not sure it's 100% municipal, but I'm happy to respond. Fortunately, I'm a member of the Burlington Lions Club, and we are very big supporters of ROC. Now, ROC provides services to youth who are facing mental issues. I do not know, to be frank with you, I'm just being absolutely frank, about what the community services are for those who are not children. But we are looking at an expansion at ROC to try to achieve to try to help those young people and their families overcome their difficulties early enough in life so that they can overcome the health issues that they're facing in mental health. That's where I think, in terms of mayor and us supporting the opportunity for more facilities like that in this region, is where we need is the approach that I like to take.
Thank you.
Okay, get a whole minute for this question, so that's good. The only thing that I would transmit is the millennials are getting viced. Like my brother moved out of my dad's house and got a $600 a month 2-bedroom apartment in Hamilton that he split with someone else, right? And this housing cost is real, and it vices you. It makes you pay more than you should have to for housing, right? And that has a whole bunch of really terrible financial effects in your whole life. At some point, let's give you just one example. At some point, you'll have a kid, right? Maybe. And then you will come out of a fog 2 years later and go, who charged all these things on these credit card bills? But if you have a house, you can go down to the bank and refinance that at very low interest rates. And if you don't, you can't. So there's a whole bunch of things that taking people out of the property ladder and putting them in this super expensive place causes stress all up and down the food chain of a whole lifespan.
Well, thank you, Sarah, in Ward 5 for that question. And I am very, very sorry to hear about the devastating loss that you have experienced from suicide. And I think everyone who's been touched by that just knows how devastating it is. And we can do something about this in our community, and we will, and we are. The Halton region has community programs, and it has a fund for funding community-led initiatives. And several years ago, I sit on the Health and Social Services Committee and was one of the panelists who looked at awarding funding to community groups that were doing work on this very issue, and we made mental health one of the top criteria because it is such an issue in our community. We also need to make sure that we preserve and protect what makes Burlington great, and that is our connection to one another. That's our walking down the street and knowing your neighbors. It's knowing who you do business with. Those things that I believe are at risk with overdevelopment. When you feel connected with your community, that gives you a sense of place.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sarah. It's interesting how we've evolved, that the stigmatization of mental illness has diminished greatly, and the Bell Let's Talk program has made a significant impact. 2 years ago, right around now, actually, I hosted a big event at the Performing Arts Center, one of my Inspire Burlington events, where I brought in Michael Landsberg. And Michael Landsberg is with TSN Sports. And for those of you that have heard Michael before, he was absolutely inspiring how open he was about his own mental health challenges. And what was more inspiring is after he spoke for 45 minutes, other people spoke openly and candidly about their own challenges or the challenges of their family. So what I've done as mayor, I've tried to do my best to destigmatize mental illness. I've been involved with the Paul Hansel Foundation. Brian Hansel's asked me to get involved with that in different events. And I make a point of doing my best to destigmatize mental illness. And I should point out that the City of Burlington has provided land to the Nelson Youth Center for 40 years actually over on at Nelson Park that
Thank you,
provides
Rick.
a great service on mental health for
Thank you.
teenagers.
Okay. So our next question comes from Rachel in Ward 1. Rachel would like to know, what specific policies will you implement to provide social services to low-income families in the City of Burlington?
Okay, so most of the social services are actually run through Halton Region. So that's where most of this, when you call, that's where most of the social services come from. So you can't, in all fairness, in a minute, you can't outline what kind of policies and what kind of funding you would need to deliver those types of services. But what you don't want to do is create a world where it's really tough to get by, really hard to get by, and then you have a whole bunch of mental services to sort of backfill that. You need to create a world where, you know, you can work 40 hours and live in your house, right? And not be stressed that you have to have another part-time, job on the side to make ends meet. So I do think, it's a total loading on people of stress and anxiety and pressure that you need to reduce, not just make sort of a terrible situation and then have these services to pick up people who've been pressured out of the system.
Thank you, Rachel in Ward 1. We've had that ward very well represented here tonight. We need to look at housing transportation costs. Those are things that are partly within the city's purview. So if you look at housing costs, inclusionary zoning, some of the things we talked about earlier about assisted and affordable housing. When you don't pay so much for your housing, you have money left for some of the other things. Looking at transit, so the region has a split pass, which reduces to half the cost of transit. I believe that we could top that up at the city, and I've already talked about free transit for seniors and students. We can also raise awareness about all the initiatives in the community that are happening, like the Gift of Giving Back, which just launched this week. It's a major food drive. We have a number of groups in our community that they need the awareness and the support, and we can be champions, we can be PR people, and make sure that we not only get involved, but we support them, and when they need it, resources from the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're so fortunate that we have so many different organizations that connect with people in need on a regular basis in so many different ways. And obviously we need to expand on that when we can. One of the issues that I'm greatly concerned about is the prevalence of payday loan establishments in our city, which really can put people over the edge financially and mentally because of the anxiety that is caused by using those establishments. And other communities have come up with ways to limit the number of those organizations by setting them up or having proper zoning and really allocating them where you want them to be. And we can't only do that. We need to create a program that I'm going to call Bank on Burlington to bring the credit unions and the financial sector together to provide financial counseling and coaching to people in significant need situations where money is a challenge, to help them navigate the challenges that they have to deal with and help counsel them with
Thanks,
regard
Rick.
to bookkeeping, etc.
Well, thank you for the question. And as the Member of Parliament, I would often hear from families who would come to me who are having issues with their financial viability here in this town. Unfortunately for Burlington, it's a growing group, but very quiet. And we need to do something about it. And I'll be frank with you, I don't think the municipality, both either at the region or at the local level, it should be taking on the full responsibility. We need our provincial partners and our federal partners to be at the table to assist people with affordability, particularly in the housing area. And we need to make that, we need to make that case at Queen's Park and in Ottawa, that this is not an issue that's going away, and that they need to be at the table financially to help these low-income families.
Thank you. All right, on to our next question. So Jackie from Ward 2, she would like to know, would you commit to providing pedestrian-only traffic zones in the downtown core on a portion of Burn Street? Why or why not?
Am I first?
I think it's Marianne's first.
Yes. I need to get my people straight.
Thank you, Jackie in Ward 2. We already have actually a lot of pedestrian-free zones in the downtown and periods with a lot of our festivals, with our road races. We've got Treats in Our Streets coming up when we've talked about road closures for that. There are temporary road closures that happen with the car show. We have lots of opportunity for pedestrian activity on our streets, but just closing a road doesn't bring people to come downtown. You have to animate that space. And so we have the Burlington Downtown Business Association, which has worked very closely with partner organizations, with tourism, so that when we close roads, we have something happening there. So I don't want to just close a road for the sake of doing it. I do think that we need to animate the space, and we have the highest number of events anywhere in the city happening in the downtown that already do close our roads.
Thank you very much for the question, Jackie. It's interesting. When I was elected as mayor 8 years ago, we found an illustration that was done in 1967 about what the downtown might look like in the year 2000. And it's interesting. It's fascinating to take a look at it. Branch Street was closed off for pedestrian traffic only from Caroline all the way down the waterfront. There were lots of tall buildings in the area. There was 4 big parking garages in the area that would allow people to park there and then walk to the downtown area. But in any event, we have to be careful with how we handle pedestrian space in the downtown streets. There is a lot of activity downtown, and we don't want to overly impact the retailers in downtown Burlington, as well as residents and other businesses. We have to be careful. Is there room to do more? Possibly, but it's got to be done in a thoughtful way, and there's got to be some specific events to go along with it. We just don't close roads for the sake of closing roads.
Thank you for the question. And my answer is no. I don't anticipate that we would close down one of the downtown streets for pedestrians only. I lived in Ottawa for a number of years, and Spark Street was pedestrian only, but you could shoot a cannon through there after 4:30 after everybody went home from work. But I'm not opposed to a consultation with not only the public but the business owners down there. Are there opportunities to have car-free days? I know we had one on Appleby Line, which the city has put on for a number of years in a row. But are there some car-free opportunities that we could do that to try to encourage that, as long as we have buy-in from all those who will be participating and that will be hopefully benefiting from the concept of pedestrian only? The other thing that I am interested in is that I've been in a number of cities where parkways are closed on Sundays, for example, from 10 till 2.
Thank you, Mike.
For cycling. Bye.
So most of the ideas that are coming down about rebuilding the city is the intellectual spirit of the whole thing is to reduce the energy use of people. Make them use less energy. You get the same value out of them, but they're less costly. They're using less energy because they're not doing what we do right now, which is very energy intensive. So I'm very into the idea of pedestrian zones. I drew an Aldershot mobility hub, and I had pedestrian zones. I had biking. I had everything away from everything. And I got a meeting, and I walked down there, and the mobility hub guys were like, hard pass. Don't like it. Hard to get set off. And I'm like, well, if you want to envision something which is low energy, which I think provides the same value, I am very open to the idea of pedestrian-only zones. If you could get buy-in of the merchants and you could turn downtown into a reverse strip mall, I think that would be a fantastic idea. And I think that is all of a sudden a high-value environment. You like Liberty Village. They got walking-only areas in Liberty Village. And so all the mobility hubs should be structured around a huge pedestrian path that people can walk around, and they're not currently.
It's me next.
Yeah. Oh.
Marianne answered the first question.
You started.
I started that one.
All right. Sorry.
So I'll be mixed up again.
Okay, moving on, shall we? So our next question, we would like to know from Mark in Ward 4. Would you commit to a sustainable budget for the development of a safe walking and cycling network? A recommendation that 5% of the 10-year capital budget be dedicated to these better streets projects.
Thanks, Mark, for asking me first. Thank you very much. I know which Mark that is. The whole issue of better streets. I mean, it makes sense. We need to invest more money in cycling appropriately. We tried something on New Street with a pilot. Anybody remember that? When I go to the door and people tell me about it, I said, "What are you talking about? I just drove along New Street. I didn't see that." But in any event, 6 out of 7 of us, Paul Sharman was the only one who didn't vote for that. But we do need to invest properly in cycling. We do need to create a proper interconnected network of safe cycling infrastructure in the city. It's not going to be everywhere, but it needs to be somewhere, and it needs to be done in a thoughtful way. So our transportation department has started a new cycling plan, and I believe it's almost done. Mark, you may know better than me because you're in contact with those people, but I believe it's almost done.
Thanks, Rick.
And we need to take a hard look at that.
Thank you, Mark, for the question. And I, not as active a cyclist as I'd like to be, but I do have a road bike that I take on occasion. And I can tell you, painting a line on a road that's a couple meters wide doesn't make it any safer, in my view. I believe in investing in proper infrastructure for cycling and walking and other modes of transportation, but I think they need to be safe. And I'm not sure that just painting roads on the lines on a road like we did at the road diet, reducing traffic lanes, is the right answer for the long-term viability and growth of cycling in this community. And so the question was, would I dedicate a certain percentage of the budget to cycling? I would say no, not at this time, because I would need the proof that it was going to be used and safe for those who would be using that facility.
So you can get me to support cycle-only infrastructure, and I like the downtown Cherry Beach. If you're going to Cherry Beach, downtown Toronto, they got a 10-foot wide lane. They got a blue line in the center, 5 feet, 5 feet. People are jogging on it. They're running on it. They're cycling on it. It provides passing, and it seems to format pretty smoothly. I'm actually not a believer in the complete streets idea, because the complete streets idea keeps trying. It's almost like the pavement that the car using is sacred, and we're trying to get as many users to touch that magic pavement as possible. And the reality is, all of these vehicles are massively different speeds, massively different weights, and I don't like them interacting at all. I think you should try and keep cyclists and pedestrians and cars as far away from each other as you can, and build the city, on that basis. Because if you've been in these European cities with tremendous amount of cycling, it's not particularly pleasant to walk around all of a sudden, because the bikes are all zipping around. So it's not a magical kind of solution to making an all modes transit system go.
Thank you. We do have, Mark in Ward 4, we do have a budget for walking and cycling right now. And so looking at what that is, we also need to enhance it, because we have a parks and trails master plan. I believe cycling is best along the hydro corridors and off-road. We have a master plan that is currently unfunded. So one of the key parts of my platform is to look at funding that plan that helps both cyclists, that helps walkers. We just invested in the city with a partnership from federal and provincial dollars in the Elgin Promenade, which is a walking cycling path. I also know that some things don't cost any money. To give pedestrian priority, to increase the time distance to walk across a street before the light turns. Some of those things that we can do to make pedestrians feel more safe on our streets don't cost anything. They just take will and courage to do.
Okay, so this time we will start with Mike.
Okay, thank you.
All right, got it.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so Stephen from Ward 1, we only have 3 more questions in this round. Stephen from Ward 1 would like to know, will there be more money allocated to infrastructure repairs in Burlington in the next 4 years?
Well, very good question. Thank you for that question from Ward 1. I think what we need to do as a community, both at the regional level and at the local level, and don't forget, every mayor and every councillor that you vote for at the local level will be at the regional level, is that basic infrastructure needs to be a priority. That's what adds, in my view, to the quality of life of living in this area, that we have the infrastructure, whether it's roads, sewer and water, all the key parts that make living in Burlington the great place that it is, needs to be a priority. And so infrastructure to be is a priority, and that's where much of our capital projects should be headed, and it needs to be for basic services and not a number of other pet projects of those who might be on council.
So when you're funding infrastructure, you instantly get into a question of how many people live here. Because if you're going to start putting millions and millions of people in Burlington, then obviously some systems just drop out in viability. And that's why you keep getting this tension of, are we supporting the road system? Are we putting more money into that? Are we synchronizing the lights? Are we producing extra lanes? Are we continuing that paradigm? Because if you have the province's places to grow mentality where more people just keep coming, eventually that model does break. Right? And that's when you flip to all these other things to try and move people into systems that are more compact and, more theoretically efficient. So you have to, in my mind, if you want to fund infrastructure, I don't think the idea that you can continually grow on this plan makes it very easy to plan the infrastructure you should have or figure out what you should be investing in. I like the total cap model where you imagine how many people are going to live here, and then you can imagine how they're going to travel and live harmoniously from there.
Thank you, Stephen from Ward 1. When I joined council in 2010, we were presented with a report that showed our infrastructure gap between the needs for infrastructure, and that's more than just roads. It's our community centers, it's our sidewalks, it's our parks. Gap of $40 to $60 million between what the need was and what the funding was. So council started a infrastructure levy, 1%, 1.25% per year over different years. Also the levy that you've paid for the hospital, 1% per year, all of that will be redirected into infrastructure. So we're getting there. But we also need to not raid our infrastructure fund, as recently happened with the marina funding for a floating wave break. $4 million from hydro reserves intended for infrastructure went 100% to pay for that instead of collecting some from the users of the marina. So the other thing is getting growth right. Growth doesn't pay for itself. It pays 80% of costs. You pick up the balance.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So as Marianne mentioned, that 1.25% we've been allocating each and every year, 1.25% annual tax rate increase to address the infrastructure gap, and we are chipping away at that, and we have to do that. For many years, council had no increases in the tax rate for about 7 years, and we got to get cut up from that, and that's what we're doing with the 1.25% built-in tax rate every year. I do want to make mention about the LaSalle Park Marina that was raised. That's been around for some time, for about 35 years, and it has cost the city virtually no money to operate. It's been operated by the LaSalle Park Marina Association. We are a Great Lakes city, and the current wave break is at its end of its useful life, and council made a decision to replace it for another 35 years and have that third party, being the LaSalle Park Marina Association, continue to run it for members of the Sailing and Boating Club, but also for other organizations like the Naval Cadets, as well as the April Sail program. We get good value out of that investment.
Thank you. Okay, 2 more to go. Beth from Ward 3. Beth asks, I am most concerned about the rising property tax costs. When I first moved to Burlington in 2009, they increased slowly and made sense. But in the past 3 years, my tax bill has increased by $500 per year. I have no idea how it can keep rising that fast, especially considering I have young children to raise. What will you do to control raising property taxes?
So here's the tension. There's no easy answers. You want to spend money? The money comes from property taxes. That's it. There's no magic source of money, right? So you have to decide how much you're going to tax people and then allocate that money. So the current Burlington city has been growing tax rates about 4%, and Halton Reach has been basically making it 0. So they average out to 2. So they do average out to inflation if you think it that way. But if Halton decides that they need money, and if they just pick inflation, we're going to discover that the Burlington tax rate is way over what's sustainable. So you have to keep to the budget. And I mean, you can pick out efficiencies here or there, but you're not going to pick out $10-20 million of city efficiencies magically. So it is part of this vice that I'm talking about, is that you're trying to create a shift in Burlington that requires a tremendous amount of money, and there's no source for that money. And that's the basic, that's where Places to Grow starts hurting, because it's just right that there.
Thank you, Beth. In Ward 3, I think that's our first question from Ward 3 tonight. So we need to get growth right. There's this sense that we get this influx of cash with new taxpayers and development charges, and the reality is that pays for about 80% of costs. The balance goes on the rest of you, the 20%. And you look at Milton, fastest growing community in Canada, also has some of the highest tax rate increases at 6 and 7%, and that's why. Taxes were over 4% 3 times in the last 8 years. I did not support any of those budgets because I didn't think that the services that we were getting were frontline services for you. We need to redirect that funding to frontline services. We need to listen to our staff on that. And each year at budget, I have presented a variety of motions, anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in savings each and every year. We can do it. We have to listen to our staff and work with the community and not expect growth to save us.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I do want to point out over the last 8 years, the overall property tax rate increase in the City of Burlington, including the city, the education component, and the region has averaged less than 2%, the average annual increase. If we take out, we just look at the City of Burlington, excluding the hospital levy, we've been about 3%. One of the reasons that contributes to the higher tax rate increases in the last few years is our assessment growth has been quite low because our population growth has been relatively low. And the assessment growth has been around 0.5% or thereabouts, when traditionally it's been around 1, maybe a little bit more than that. And it's 1.5% of the region. I do want to point out the opportunity we have, though, to have multi-year budgets and have more predictability in our budgeting, and which will help be more predictable with our tax rate increases. One of the eye-opening things to me, I'm not sure we're going to have enough time for this, one of the eye-opening things to me is when we did a review of the service for transit.
Thank you, Rick.
And you're right, I don't have time for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question on taxes. I was hoping it was coming today. I believe that the city and the region should continue to keep taxes as low as possible and never go above the rate of inflation. I don't think there's a reason that we need to go above the rate of inflation. One area where I think we need a little more transparency in the budgeting process is my experience in Ottawa is that we had a plans and priorities document for every single department. We knew where they were going to be spending the money. We knew how many people we're going to be using. And at the end of the year, we were able to look, the public, you can go online and see them, the public could look to see what was accomplished and what wasn't. And I think we need a better opportunity. And I'm going to use the hospital levy as an example. I know there was discussion about the hospital levy and that we were going to, as taxpayers, we were going to fund the expansion and the renewal of our hospital, which is great. But were we asked whether that money then should come back to the taxpayer or be used for infrastructure? I don't recall ever being asked.
Great, thank you. All right.
Be used for infrastructure. I don't recall
I know. How exciting. We're on the last question of the second round.
Great.
Second round. There's more. How many rounds?
Yeah.
The torture continues. It's okay. The next round is a little adaptation of the TV show Ellen, so it just involves panels, yes or no. FYI. Okay. All right. So to wrap up this round, a number, I know, it's like there's a farm in the backyard or something. Okay, so a number of Burlingtonians are interested to know, and this we received from quite a few people on the online questionnaire. One of the areas Burlington dropped in the Money Sense rankings was our ability to offer family-oriented services. An aspect of this is a number of daycares and cost of access. What are you going to do to make these services more available?
Repeat that question again, please.
Money Sense rankings dropped, especially for family-oriented services. An aspect of this is the number of daycares and cost of access. What can you do to make these services more available?
Well, I wish they would, because I have 2 children in daycare right now. So again, it comes down to budget, right? It comes down to, are you willing to put more money into property tax so something else can be subsidized? And if you want the government to subsidize anything, I do think children are a reasonable place where the government can collect money up and subsidize it in some way. The daycare situation is now where the daycare per day is so costly, I can't imagine the number of families that it's unaffordable, and people are getting kicked out of the workforce to take care of kids, where they might want to be in 4 days or 3 days and have their kids more. So I don't have any answers at the municipal level of what to do about that. That's going to have to be another one of these things that the province has the money and the plan to implement. We can't just implement it ourselves.
Thank you for that question. So the Halton region does provide subsidies for daycare. So this could be something that we would look at to see what the wait list is for those subsidies for spaces that are provided by Halton region. I think as a city, working with our partners, not only at the region, but our school boards, is looking at providing space for daycare operators at cost-effective prices. So there's a co-op that was offered at Pearson School that is still there. There's YMCA daycare at Bateman. These things work. We also need to look at family-oriented services across the board. So more than daycares, we are losing programming. I've talked to many families who want programming, especially for that 12 to 17, more sports fields, more access to ice time. We know that our folks are leaving our community. Many of them I've talked at the door to get those programming and services. So I think we can do both to solve that.
Forgive me, I'm going to ask that question one more time because I'm not sure if the answers jive with the question. So if you don't mind. And I know this is the second time I asked for you to repeat the question.
I know. I feel like I need to ask myself the question sometimes. All right. So in a gist here, Money Sense rankings dropped. An aspect of this is a number of daycares and cost of access. What are you going to do to make these services more available?
Thank you. I just want to be clear that Money Sense was mentioned at the beginning. There's a perception this year created by my colleague to the right here, that Burlington is dropped in ranking because of something's happened in Burlington. But the reality is the Money Sense ranking methodology has changed, and it's changed very dramatically. We have not changed. The ranking system has changed. And the Burlington Economic Development Corporation did a thorough analysis of why we changed. And the two main reasons that we changed is that Money Sense started considering growth differently. And the faster you grow, the more points you get. And the other thing that's different this year, a major thing that's different, is the wait time for medical procedures is now included, and that affected our ranking as well. So Burlington did not change, but the methodology of what Money Sense uses to rank communities changed. Burlington did not change.
Okay, I'll answer the question. I think and I find it very interesting that it follows the question about property tax, because people want their property taxes under control. If you want more services, something has to give. It's really simple. It's not really, the math is simple. If you want more services, you got to pay more, and for the municipalities, it's through property tax. So, in my view, I think we need partners on daycare services that for families. And that partnership, I think, is at the provincial level. I think that if you expect the municipality of Burlington to add daycare spaces by supporting that through the municipal tax base, I don't think that's going to happen. And so, but I do see us as a role at the region lobbying our provincial partners for more money for family services, including daycare.
Thank you.
Is that the last question?
Yes, it was the last question, but I am going to hand out one of these, so if you don't mind, take one and pass it on. And we don't need the microphone for this, so if you just want to prop it up there. But we will use that for one final, for one final word. All right, great. I know, right? So for this section, I'm going to ask rapid lightning questions. There's 10 of them. You have 2 seconds to answer. I know you might feel like you're on the fence with some of them, but there's only 2 options, so do or die. Ready? Ready? Gladiators ready? No on the fence. It has to be a hard yes or a hard no. No 50-50. That was witty of you, though. All right, so lightning round. Do you support the official plan as submitted to the region, yes or no? Number 2. Do you support Waterdown becoming part of Burlington? I hope everyone at home can see this. This is fun. All right. Number 3. Does Burlington need more parking right now? Parking. Parking right now. You have 2 seconds to answer. All right. Number 4. Should future parking be built underground? All right, question 5. Should downtown Burlington be a mobility hub? All right, moving on to number 6. Should Burlington permit local retail cannabis stores? I heard some gulping up here, in case you didn't. All right. Sorry. Wow. All right. Number 7. Did you ride a bike in the last 7 days? And because it was raining, let's say the past week and a half. No bikes. All right. All right. Number 9. Have you been to... Oh, no. Number 8. Sorry. Did you take Burlington Transit in the last 7 days? Okay. Number 9. Have you been to a Burlington park in the past 7 days? And of course, because it was raining again, we'll say past week and a half. All right. And final question, lightning round. Do you drink Burlington tap water?
Oh, yes.
All right. Thank you for participating. All right. So now for our final questions. Let's take the mic. We'll bring it down here to Mary Ann. There are going to be 3 questions, short and sweet, sentence or less, not a run-on sentence. I was also an English major, so I'll cut off the run-on sentence if it's too long. All right, so don't worry, it's short and sweet.
My paragraphs?
It's okay. It's more into your personal style. That's what this is for. So number 1, what's your favorite hangout spot? It could be anywhere.
The front room of my house, which is filled with sunlight when my dog cuddles up with me when at the end of a day when I'm reading reports.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rick, what's your favorite hangout spot?
Well, I'm going to change it up a little bit. This is walking distance from my house, and it's a regular place for my wife and I on a Friday night if we're not doing anything, which doesn't happen very often, and that's QB's.
Great.
Right beside Mike's campaign office.
Will you buy if I come down? Okay, there we go. My favorite hangout spot.
Yeah.
My wife and I like to go out for dinner, and I got to be honest, we often go downtown for dinner. So we like to go to events. We love the events that are happening downtown. So if we're hanging out somewhere, we go, whether it's Sound of Music, Rib Fest, whatever's happening.
Yeah.
We're downtown goers. She'd like to live down there actually in your ward.
Welcome.
I mean, my favorite hangout spot is obviously the Mayor Millennial Forum. But
shout out.
But minus that, I have small children. I don't have time to hang out. But eventually, in 10 years.
Thank you. All right, let's start with Rick on the next one. Okay, question 2. What's your favorite family pastime in the city?
Family pastime in the city. Well, I would have to say we live on the bike path by Nelson High School and the Appleby Tennis Club. And the favorite family activity is when my wife and I go for a nice walk on a Sunday on the bike path or on the multi-purpose pathway. And it's even better if one of my daughters comes with us, which doesn't happen very often.
Thank you.
So, family pastime?
Yeah, pastime in Burlington.
Well, my daughters don't live with us anymore, and so when they were here, I'd love to go watch them play sports. They're both athletes. I know.
What sports do they play?
So how long do we have? So
just name the sports.
volleyball, basketball, track and field. My youngest daughter had a NCAA track and field scholarship. So grandpa or dad was in the audience yelling. But if I really want to do something that I love going to the movies.
Yeah.
My wife won't let me go, but I love going to the movies.
Great stuff. Thank you.
So since my kids are young, they like going to the park, and they have little names for all the parks. But sometimes they say, we want to go to a new park. So it's kind of, if you've got small kids, you can pick out a park you've never seen on Google Maps. And it is kind of amazing the number of play structures that exist in Burlington. When you start looking around at all the parks and all the communities, there is a lot of different ones, all just in little neighborhoods. You can kind of go around, and the kids get to see a new place.
Fantastic. Thanks. All right. No. She's got a... Wait, you didn't respond yet. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was on that one. All right.
Well, I love to hike. It's one of the things that brought us out here to settle our family from Toronto. We would go hiking at Mount Nemo, Hilton Falls. We know every inch of every conservation Halton park and many more. And then we would go and grab a beer at Emma's back porch. That's what brought us here, truth, the escarpment and the waterfront. And now that my daughter's 20, she can actually enjoy it with us.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So the last question here. What's your favorite city, aside from Burlington, of course? And why? I know. It's so hard to choose.
I have been to a lot of cities. I'll be frank with you. I really like Tokyo.
Me too.
If I had an opportunity to live there for like 2 or 3 years, I would, just to experience. I've been there a number of times. I just love the vibrancy.
What do you like about it? The vibrancy? What else?
Yeah, look at in Tokyo, in a city their size, there is no garbage cans on the streets. Why? Because everybody takes their garbage either home or back to their office. There's no litter anywhere. It's safe. The very first time I was there, these guys at a park. They were dropping their bikes and their backpacks, and they were going for a run. And when the translator I was with, I said, "Oh, we should tell them. We should tell them." No, they didn't lock them up. You don't have to do it. It's safe. And they went for a 5K run, and they're back for the backpack. It's just if you get a chance to go to Tokyo or to Japan, you need a translator, unless you speak Japanese, but I would go.
And the food's to die for, and if you don't know what okonomiyaki is, you should Google it and try it. It's delicious.
So my favorite city I'd move to if I could move to Burlington would be Waterdown, or New Burlington, as I call it.
All right.
If I win mayor, you can come and be the court. No. More respectful than that. No, we need to laugh more. Absolutely. And I love comics. I love community. We have a downtown festival coming in February, by the way. I love hiking, so I gotta say, I would love to live in Banff, Alberta. There is nowhere else you can go from 30 degrees on the ground to snow caps in one day, thunderstorms, come back down, make sure you bring your bear spray. It makes you realize that we are not in control of nature, and we have to respect the natural environment around us. We have to live within it. We are here for such a temporary time, and so it's great exercise too. And then sitting in a hot tub after with your beverage and watching the snow fall and the snow peaks across, there's nothing like it.
Thank you. Now I feel like I need a vacation. Honey?
So I'll answer this way. Portland, Oregon. I was there about 7 years ago, and I had the opportunity to meet with some of the people that work at the City of Portland. Had an opportunity to meet with the mayor. And what really impresses me about Portland, Oregon is the intimacy of that community. It's a fairly large city, but it has a nice intimacy. They have great transit, many different forms of transit. They have a great cycling network. They have a great food truck culture, which is really unique. And they have a great craft beer culture, which is the real reason why I like Portland, Oregon.
The truth comes out.
But they have it has a great urban vibe. It has a nice scale. It's not a big city, but it's a good sized city, and it has everything you need. It has an NBA basketball team. It has a Major League Soccer team.
So when's Burlington getting pro sports? Like, I'm kidding.
Well, we pursued that or the Ticats pursued us about 7 years ago. But anyway, Portland, Oregon. It's a great city, and it is close to the mountains.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for sharing what your favorite city is and why. Now, as we do begin to wrap up the final question of the evening, this will be timed. It's 2 minutes. It is not a rebuttal. It is what your impact will be on our community and what you want your legacy to be as mayor for the city of Burlington. So we're going to start with you, Rick, and then we're going to pass it down again.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. I've had the honor and privilege to be mayor for the last 8 years, and we've accomplished a great deal together as a community. When I was elected, we had this mess on the waterfront that we had to clear up, which we did, being the Brant Street beer. There you go. At the pier. And we dealt with the legal issues as well. We finalized a funding agreement for Joseph Brant Hospital that's resulted in the new Michael E. Chin and family patient tower. I believe we've done a good job managing our tax rate increases overall, less than 2% per year on average for the last 8 years. I believe the most important issue that we need to deal with is at this particular crossroads in the history of the city of Burlington is how we move forward. And I understand that there is angst in the community about development. And now we have a new opportunity to review where we're at with the Places to Grow plan. And we have a new provincial government that is willing to have dialogue. And they've expressed that interest. And now's the time for tested and stable leadership to have that dialogue with the provincial government to discuss where we go from here and how we can mitigate some of the concerns that has been raised. The province holds all the cards. They provide land use policy, and it's up to the city of Burlington and other cities to comply. But I guess I would like to think that my legacy would be that I was able to bring council together to make some difficult decisions, and I believe we've done that over the last 8 years, and I believe we can still continue to do that over the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you for the question, and I enjoyed tonight's discussion. I would thank you again for hosting us. I've been an elected official for the City of Burlington for 22 years. And I believe that we live in a terrific city. Like, really, at the end of the day, we do have issues facing Burlington, but we live in a great, great community, and we have great people here. But the issues that we're facing, in my view, we need help with. And most of that help comes from the province. And so with my years of experience as an elected official, both at the local level and at the federal level, my understanding of the processes and how things actually work at different levels of government, and my connections, relationships, whatever you want to call them, with the current government at Queen's Park, I believe I can get Burlington's issues that we are facing to the front of the line to be resolved with our partners at the provincial level. I think I am the best candidate on this stage to make that happen. As for my legacy, I want to come back to the question you asked just before this. I want everybody in Burlington, when I meet them on a beach somewhere else, to say that and you ask them where the best place to live is, they say they're from Burlington, and that Burlington is the best community in the world to live in. And that would be my legacy as mayor.
Thank you very much.
So, rewinding the tape, from 2006, this Places to Grow business came in. I caught wind of it in about 2012, and by 2014, I was pretty sure that this was a bad idea and wasn't going to work. And I ran in 2014 to try and get people to understand what is going on, because everybody I talk to doesn't have a firm idea of the level of change which has been mandated. So I think that's a huge failure in communication. If starting 4 years ago, people had a better idea what was happening, then we'd get a lot more change. Because in reality, I am not going to change, and none of us are going to change the province's mind, because we're so witty and so persuasive. If there is not this signal to them that people are so fed up that they're going to vote them out of office if this keeps happening. And the only way to do that I can see is electing people that say, we're going to put in a 6th floor limit. It's understandable. You can see it, right? And you eventually vote for someone who has that clear a message, and it gets implemented. And if it's not at that level of clarity, the province gets a lot of safety on just throwing things on the municipality, not giving us money to actually pay to get them done, but just says, well, that's a municipal, that's talk to your local municipality, but the fact that there's no, daycare is too expensive, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the legacy that I would like to be is part of educating everyone in the city as to what is going on and how top down all planning is how become, and how it's all getting pushed out from this center spoke. And if after 4 years more people have a better understanding of the systems and what's going on in the government, then I think that would be a good legacy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you to all the folks who organized this. Thank you for hosting. I want to thank my colleagues for being on the stage. It's not easy to put your name on a ballot and step forward into the public eye, and for the service that they've given to the community already. And mostly thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks to the folks watching at home. What my legacy I'd like to be is we need to get growth right. We have to stop with a new mayor and a new council approving developments that are 2, 3, 4 times what is in our official plan and what the provincial requirements are of us. We can do this. We have the tools to get growth right, and we have to work with you in our community to get growth right. We need to restore civility when we discuss these difficult issues. That has left the room in this campaign. This is my fifth election, and I would say this is the nastiest election campaign that I've ever seen. In the past year, decorum on council and with residents has deteriorated. We have to get back to working with our community. It's okay to discuss and debate issues vigorously. It's okay to have different perspectives. It's okay to talk about somebody's voting record or track record. These are the hallmarks of democracy, but that is not what's happening right now. So I want to restore trust and civility so we truly have open government, so we are working with you and bringing your ideas to the table. I'd like to see a nonpartisan approach to municipal government and working with our provincial and federal partners, because they change a lot, and you need somebody that can talk to all levels of government. Look at track record. Don't just look at what any of us on this stage are saying. And I'll leave you with this story. When I joined in 2010, my very first motion was to stop the wrecking ball on Freeman Station, because I believe so strongly that the community could do what this council couldn't do for 2 years with $1 million of funding. We stopped the wrecking ball and saved the Freeman Station, and it's down on Fairview if you want to look at it.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Okay, everybody, this about wraps it up. I have a couple thank yous before we depart. So huge thanks to all the candidates. Good luck. Thank you very much for taking time out of your evening to be with us. Godspeed through the rest of your campaign. I know it's not easy, a lot of, hard work, but it will be worth it. Thank you again to B-Town Sound for hosting us this evening. It's a lovely space. We loved it here. Thank you. Very cozy. In addition to SB Prime for the delicious treats, thank you, SB Prime. Thank you to Your TV for filming the event and making it available to the community. Please check their website in a few days on Your TV to watch the video. And again, thank you to all the attendees. If it weren't for you, tonight would not have been possible with your questions and with your participation this evening. It's essential to be civically engaged. So heartfelt thank you to all of you for coming. So don't forget to go out and vote, spread the word, and have a great night.